So Caitlin, how will you decide what school to choose?
So for me personally, I will likely not apply to any other school besides NC State. I'm originally from New York, but I just got my I just got my residency for NC, and so because of that, North Carolina residency would lead to like NC State being the most affordable for me. And so based on expenses alone, I would probably only apply to NC State. I have considered other schools, and I've spoken to professors, but a lot of the professors say that once they're in the top 20, it doesn't matter between Cornell or Georgia or NC State, you're going to get a good education at all of them. So for me, the next thing that's really important is just expenses. So because of that, I'm really just only going to apply to NC State.
Okay. So what has impacted this decision, and how has it impacted it?
Well, I know that it's going to cost a lot to go to vet school, and I don't want to wind up taking out years worth of loans. And so the only decision that I can say that might be impacted is that if I don't get in the first time and I continue working full-time for more time and saving up a lot more money, then I would expand to applying to more schools. But if I'm just applying right now, my plan is in this application cycle right now, and I haven't been working full-time for years and I only have X amount of money saved up, I will likely only apply to NC State. But if I have to apply more times and I have more time to save, then I'll probably apply to more.
Okay. And what about you, Erin?
So just like Caitlin said, I'm probably only going to apply to NC State. I mentioned earlier how I'm double majoring, so I'll have the opportunity to apply twice while I'm still in my undergrad, and still get my undergrad degree. But for me, it's purely a financial decision, just because, again, just like she mentioned, I don't want to be able to, or want to have to take out years of loans and have to pay that back for the rest of my life. So for me, it'll probably just be NC State. And then the second year, if I don't get in that first time that I'm applying, I might apply to something like Texas A&M. But for now, what I'm looking at is purely financial. So I'm looking at, the cheapest school and the one that's not going to leave me with the most student loans. So.
And Caitlin, what made your study abroad experience stand out?
So for me, I studied abroad in Sydney, Australia, and that's where the majority of my veterinary clinical hours came from. So for me, the reason why it stands out is because obviously Australia has a lot of exotic animals, and so we got some exotic animals in the clinics. It was mostly a small animal clinic, but I was able to experience some exotic animal cases, a lot of exotic birds, and some fruit bats. And so those are interesting to see because it's nothing like anything I've seen here. Also, all the wildlife was done pro bono, and so if there was ever an injured exotic species that was taken into the hospital just because somebody saw it and it wasn't anybody's pet but they wanted to help it, it would be done without any charge to anyone. And so that was really nice to see, and kind of inspired me in a couple different ways. And then also it was just a little different as well because the systems there are a little different, and so I had to learn about certain diseases that exist there that aren't here. I learned that rabies is not a thing in Australia, so that was not something that was ever a concern. And just the whole system of measurement, so they measure everything in not the way we do, so they measure using kilograms and milliliters and stuff like that.
And Erin, what other types of jobs can you get as a veterinarian?
So just like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people go straight into wanting to be interested in small animal when they come into their undergrad, or they want to be interested, or they want to go into equine or something like that. But I think a lot of the jobs like lab animal, a teaching professor, are all overlooked. And those are two of the careers that I'm interested in. So lab animal is just something I've been interested in from working with my research with Dr. Petulli and I. Lemurs. It's really, really interesting to me just being able to work with those animals. And so that's what got me interested in that. And I've heard a lot of people say the reason they're interested in mixed animal and large animal is because they don't want to be stuck in an office all day, but I actually enjoy an office setting and I like having the organization of being in a workplace. So that's kind of why I'm interested in that career, and that's just something I feel like a lot of people don't consider. So there's a lot of different jobs that you can get, but those are the two that I'm most interested in.
And Caitlin, what types of large animal experience do you have?
So, growing up, I had a lot of experience with horses, but more recently, I've been volunteering at the dairy education unit, and so now I have a lot more experience with cows, and that's been interesting for a lot of different reasons, because before this year I had never had any experience with cows, and now I learned a lot more about the dairy production business and also just calves in general, and it's taught me a lot of different things that I would not have known before. I've realized certain other things that I didn't particularly like about that experience, but it made me more interested as a whole in working with large animals. Now that interest is even stronger than my small animal interest. But certain things I didn't like was that, so because it's like dairy production business, obviously they're more focused on actual business aspects of it and certain things that are more profitable as opposed to how things would be in nature. So they immediately take calves away from the mother and stuff like that. And that's something that like I didn't particularly love, but I understand because I have a business background why they do it. But in general, the experience just gave me kind of a better perspective and opened my mind to see a lot of different things that I didn't know before. That's the majority of my large animal experience.
So you mentioned also working with horses as well and working with the dairy cows. What tasks are you responsible for either the horses or the cows?
So with the cows, I can either volunteer in 2 different shifts. So one is with actually milking cows, and so that's directly goes towards the production, the business. But the thing is that that's a lot of that's just working with pregnant females, older females, and then the calves are the separate volunteer shift. That's like the second thing I can volunteer with, and that's basically working with pregnant females and their babies. And so if a female has a baby, then you help like bring the calf away from the mother, and then all the calves that are newborns up to say 2 months old, you help with their feeding, and some of them need to be bottle fed, and then some of them that are like a little bit older, you have to keep track of their food and kind of see how much they've eaten from day to day so that you can slowly increase and they can grow to be stronger. And so a lot of that is just feeding and then like covering them up at night if it's cold outside, if it's below 32 degrees, like freezing, and just supplying them with water and new bedding and stuff like that.
And Erin, tell us about your favorite and least favorite professor.
So my least favorite professor would probably have to be my economics teacher from last semester. I just feel like she was really unwilling to help students, and as somebody who wants to probably go into education, I always want to be there for my students, and as somebody who's worked with kids in the past, you know, the best way they learn is through feedback and through giving them tools to help themselves. But I feel like she was just really unwilling to help students, and she was always condescending when you asked questions, and I think that's not the way that a professor should act towards their students, because the professor is there to help the students. So I think that was probably my least favorite professor, just purely for the fact that she wasn't there for her students. And then as for my favorite professor, that would probably have to be the exact opposite. Somebody who was really there for me when I needed help was Dr. Maggard, who was my chemistry professor. I really enjoyed working with him. I went to almost all of his office hours, so it was great to go and get experience with chemistry, which it wasn't a great topic for me. I didn't understand it very well, so with him being willing to meet with me during office hours and me going almost every week and bugging him about simple questions, I think the way that he handled it and the way that he was always willing to help was always really impactful to me.
And Caitlin, what role do veterinarians play in the community?
So this is something that Erin kind of mentioned a little bit before about kind of jobs that you can get as a veterinarian, but in general there's a lot of different roles that veterinarians can play. So they can go more of like the ecological environment route, and they can help a lot with sustaining the environment and wildlife, and obviously that helps the community because everything needs to be in balance, and if someone's not there looking out for those species, everything will be thrown out of balance. And then veterinarians also can play like a role in just like food science and kind of knowing the diseases associated with, well, diseases that are transmittable between animals, and then food production, and then that can lead to like diseases that humans can get, and just in general, if there's ever any viruses that are from not just like foodborne illnesses, but just kind of under regulation of certain meats or something like that, then that's something that veterinarians have to know a lot about, because it's not really something that anybody else studies. Obviously, regular scientists and doctors can study that, but specifically the diseases that come from animals is something that like veterinarians have the main responsibility to like look out for. And I would say like plays a big part as well. And then just in general, there's so many people who have pets, and veterinarians need to be there to be able to care for those people's pets, because nowadays it's like people's pets are like their family, and so obviously it's a big part of the community in general.